Sigourney Weaver was born in New York City in the autumn of 1949, into a world that looked stable from the outside, but felt quietly unsettled from within. Her father, Sylvester Pat Weaver, was one of the most influential television executives of his era, a man who helped shape the modern American broadcast system. While her mother, Elizabeth Inglis, was a British actress trained in classical theater and remembered by many for her role in Alfred Hitchcock's The Lady Vanishes, long before Sigourney ever entered the picture. On paper, this was a powerful pedigree, but inside the household, it translated less into warmth and more into distance. Sigourney later hinted that she grew up surrounded by adult conversations, schedules, and ambitions, where children were expected to adapt rather than be centered. She was the only child, and that solitude mattered, because it meant she learned early how to entertain herself, how to listen carefully, and how to stay quiet when the room felt emotionally crowded. Parents separated while she was still young, and although she never described the divorce as traumatic, she acknowledged that it reinforced a sense of self-reliance. She did not grow up feeling abandoned, but she did grow up feeling that emotional security was something you constructed internally rather than received automatically as a child. She gravitated toward books, museums, and places where she could disappear without explanation. She once said that she loved environments where nobody expected her to be charming or small or agreeable, and that reading allowed her to live other lives without being seen herself. During these early years, one thing became impossible to ignore. Her body began to change faster than her peers. She grew unusually tall, long before she was emotionally prepared for visibility, and adults commented on it casually. Strangers stared, classmates whispered, and she internalized the message that her presence entered a room before her personality did. Years later, she admitted that she hated being looked at as a young girl, not because she lacked confidence, but because she had not yet learned how to manage attention. She did not experience her height as power. She experienced it as exposure. And instead of leaning into it, she retreated inward, becoming observant, controlled, and emotionally economical. People who knew her then remember a girl who listened more than she spoke, who noticed everything, and rarely revealed what she felt. This habit was not shyness, it was strategy. She was learning how to survive being visible without being vulnerable. By the time she reached her late teens, she already sensed that the world had limited categories for women, and that she did not fit easily into any of them. She was not soft in the expected way, not decorative, not eager to please, and she felt that difference acutely when she entered Stanford University in the late 1960s. While many students around her embraced experimentation, rebellion, and constant expression, Sigourney moved through campus, quietly studying English literature and spending long hours alone in libraries. She later explained that literature felt safer than performance because it allowed her to analyze emotion rather than expose it. She was drawn to structure, language, and meaning, not applause. It was during this period that she made a decision that outsiders would later romanticize, but which she experienced as deeply personal. She stopped using the name Susan and chose Sigourney, after encountering it in The Great Gatsby. She has said that Susan felt tied to expectation, politeness, and a version of herself that no longer fit, while Sigourney felt distant, strong, and emotionally neutral, like a name that could absorb projection without collapsing. This change was not announced. It was adopted quietly among friends and classmates, but it marked the first time she consciously separated herself from inherited identity and chose authorship over acceptance. After graduating Stanford, she stood at a crossroads, and, in conversations with people close to her, she reportedly expressed doubt about acting, not because she lacked ability, but because she questioned whether she possessed the temperament required to constantly expose emotion. Nevertheless, she applied to Yale School of Drama, believing that discipline, technique, and rigor might give her confidence. What Yale gave her instead was something harsher and more formative. The environment was competitive, intense, and emotionally demanding. And while her intelligence and work ethic were respected, her reserved nature drew skepticism. Instructors challenged her emotional accessibility, and one comment in particular followed her for years. When she was told that audiences might admire her but struggle to connect with her, she later admitted that this frightened her because it echoed a fear she had carried since childhood, that she might always be seen before she was understood. She did not rebel outwardly. She absorbed the criticism and turned it inward, refining control rather than abandoning herself when she left Yale in the mid-1970s. She did not feel triumphant. She felt prepared to endure. And that distinction would define everything that came next. After leaving Yale, Sigourney Weaver entered New York at a moment when the city was raw, uncertain, and unforgiving. And that atmosphere mirrored her internal state. She was technically trained, intellectually sharp, and emotionally guarded. And yet, none of that translated into immediate opportunity. The late 1970s were defined by waiting auditions that ended politely, phone calls that never came, and days structured around survival rather than ambition. She supported herself through temporary work, took small theater roles when they appeared, and learned how to exist without reassurance. Friends from that period later recalled that she never complained aloud, but often questioned privately whether seriousness was mistaken for talent. She has since admitted that this was the first time she truly considered the possibility that acting might not work out. Not because she lacked ability, but because she lacked a clear place in an industry that preferred easily readable types. She felt too tall, too intense, too ambiguous, and she began preparing herself emotionally for a life on stage rather than screen, because theater felt more forgiving of complexity. During this time, she formed quiet bonds with other struggling actors, people who understood the exhaustion of constant rejection. One friend remembered long conversations late at night where Sigourney spoke less about fame and more about wanting work that made sense to her, that reflected how she actually moved through the world, cautiously, observantly, without emotional excess. This internal orientation mattered, because when Alien crossed her path, it did not arrive as a dream, but as a practical necessity. The script described a character named Ripley, without gender emphasis and without heroic speeches. And Sigourney later said that she recognized herself immediately, not in the situation, but in the restraint. Ripley did not perform fear. She managed it. Filming took place under deliberately tense conditions. The cast was often kept in the dark to preserve authenticity. And Sigourney found the experience psychologically demanding. She has acknowledged that the famous chest-burster scene shocked her, genuinely, and that she felt emotionally exposed afterward, not because of fear, but because the reaction had been extracted rather than controlled. Yet something aligned during that production. For the first time, she did not feel pressured to soften or explain herself. Ripley's survival depended on awareness rather than charm. And that mirrored Sigourney's own coping mechanisms. When Alien was released, the reaction was swift and overwhelming. But the internal shift lagged behind the external one. Critics called her fearless. Audiences declared her a new kind of heroine. And she found herself watching a version of herself being constructed publicly that she had not consciously created. This disconnect produced one of the most enduring tensions of her life. She was celebrated for strength, while privately grappling with doubt. She later admitted that she was terrified of disappointing people who believed in her authority because she did not feel authoritative every day. This fear influenced her behavior in interviews on sets and in relationships. She became more controlled, more careful, less willing to reveal uncertainty because uncertainty felt dangerous. Once the world decided you were strong, success narrowed her options as much as it expanded them. She was quickly offered variations of Ripley roles, defined by authority, restraint, and endurance. And while grateful for work, she sensed the beginnings of confinement. She resisted, openly rebelling, quietly, choosing projects that complicated her image. Ghostbusters allowed humor and vulnerability. Gorillas in the Mist demanded emotional exposure and obsession. But each choice came with scrutiny, and the labels followed her. Cold, intimidating, unapproachable adjectives that ignored context and gendered expectations. She internalized these perceptions, not as wounds, but as signals to guard her. In her life, she has spoken rarely but honestly about how fame intensified her instinct to protect privacy. She married, built a family, and deliberately separated personal fulfillment from professional validation. People around her noticed that she did not chase admiration, she chased coherence. A close friend once recalled her saying that being misunderstood was less painful than being dishonest. And that philosophy guided decisions that cost her visibility but preserved her sense of self. This period set the pattern for everything that followed. Sigourney Weaver would continue to work consistently but selectively, choosing alignment over momentum, endurance over exposure, and internal truth over external approval. And that choice would later define how she navigated both resurgence and silence as her career evolved. Beyond the image that first made her famous. Thank you for listening to the end. If you have any thoughts or opinions, feel free to leave a comment below. And don't forget to like and comment to support the channel, and stay tuned for our next videos.